Keefe's murder trial has been delayed due to overwhelming evidence. Yes, you heard that right. Overwhelming evidence. The mystery of Tupac Shakur's murder continues to captivate audiences even beyond the upcoming trial that Dwayne Keefe D is facing for it.
For years, Keefe D has been very vocal. He was in Vegas the night Tupac was shot, and that he was riding in the car where the bullets came from.
In the shadows of one of hip-hop's most notorious murders, a name emerges. Keefe D, the man who claims to have masterminded the plot that took down Tupac Shakur. The truth behind Tupac's death has been buried under decades of lies, corruption, and betrayal. But what if the man who pulled the trigger wasn't just another gangster, but someone much deeper involved in a war fueled by money, betrayal, and power?
In that conversation, and in recent times, Keefe D was going around saying that he was there, he was putting himself there. He has since been locked up. In the latest update, they did an interview with him, and he's tearfully pleading like, I wasn't there, I wasn't even there. I don't know if he's just saying he was just bullshitting.
Right.
Let's uncover the explosive truth behind why Keefe D may be the one who ended Tupac's life. September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas. A night that started with an electric buzz before it turned deadly. Tupac Shakur had just witnessed Mike Tyson destroy Bruce Seldon in under 2 minutes at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. The crowd was alive with energy. Death Row Records was celebrating, and somewhere in that same building, a series of events was unfolding that would soon claim the life of one of the most influential rappers to ever live.
But did Snoop Dogg know something was going to happen that night?
The next day, when we turned on the news, all we seen was the yellow tape, and it just was all bad.
Shakur was shot 4 times after leaving the Mike Tyson boxing match in Las Vegas in a car driven by Marion Suge Knight, the head of his label, Death Row Records.
What most people know is that Tupac was shot in a drive-by on Flamingo Road later that night. What most people do not know is that the decision to kill him had already been made hours earlier inside that very arena, after a fistfight that lasted less than 60 seconds. And the man who helped orchestrate everything, the man who was sitting in the white Cadillac when the shots rang out, spent over 2 decades walking free, giving interviews, writing a book, and telling the world exactly what he did while authorities could do nothing about it. That man is Keefe D, and his story is one of the most jaw-dropping, infuriating, and chilling true crime stories in American history.
Shakur's murder, an unsolved case since 1996 when he was shot and killed near the Las Vegas Strip. As first reported by the 8 News Now investigators, Metro Police arrested Davis in 2023 after he wrote a book and gave interviews stating he passed the gun to the shooter.
Dwayne Keith Davis, known on the streets as Keefe D, was not some low-level gang member. He was a shot caller for the Southside Compton Crips, one of the most feared and well-organized criminal organizations operating in Los Angeles during the 1990s. He ran drug operations, he commanded loyalty, and when something needed to get done, people came to him. Orlando Anderson, the man widely believed to have pulled the trigger on Tupac, was not just a fellow gang member. He was Keefe D's nephew. This was family. This was personal. And when Tupac made the catastrophic mistake of putting hands on Orlando Anderson inside the MGM Grand that night, he did not just start a fight with a random gang member. He lit the fuse on a bomb that Keefe D was more than ready to detonate.
I stand firm on the point that Tupac, Suge Knight, and the rest of those dudes didn't have any business putting their hands on my beloved nephew, Baby Lane, period. Then jumping on my nephew gave us the ultimate green light to do something to their ass.
Exactly.
Yes, to understand why this happened, you have to go back further than that night in Vegas. The East Coast versus West Coast rivalry had been building for years, and Death Row Records sat at the center of it all. Suge Knight, the towering, terrifying CEO of Death Row, had built his empire on intimidation and muscle. Tupac, who had signed to Death Row while in prison after Suge bailed him out, had fully embraced the West Coast identity. He was wearing Blood's colors. He was surrounding himself with Death Row muscle, and he was making enemies at an alarming rate, not just in New York, but in the streets of Compton itself. The Southside Crips had existing tensions with Death Row, and Tupac's proximity to that world made him a target by association long before Vegas.
Were you guys intimidated at all to go in the studio together?
No, I mean, he bring the best out of me. You know
That's
what
how
I'm
it
saying?
is, yeah.
Snoop took the baton, he ran with it. When Tupac got the baton, he took Death Row to the next level.
Next year, Death Row gonna start printing our own money.
On the night of the Tyson fight, as a Death Row affiliate was spotted by members of the Southside Crips inside the MGM Grand. There was a prior incident, a robbery, or an assault, depending on who you ask, where a Death Row chain had been taken from one of their people. When Tupac and his entourage spotted Orlando Anderson in the lobby, Tupac did not hesitate. He walked up and threw the first punch. What followed was a group beatdown, Death Row, security, and affiliates stomping Orlando Anderson on the casino floor while security cameras caught everything.
And Orlando is the shooter. He's the known shooter. I mean, everybody know Orlando Anderson was a shooter. So Dre got cold feet. He didn't want to do it. He gave the gun to Orlando, and Orlando shot Tupac and Suge.
Yeah, he did his thing, yeah.
But now in a new interview with ABC News, he's claiming he's innocent.
I'm innocent. I ain't killed nobody, never did ever kill nobody.
Orlando Anderson was left humiliated, bloodied, and burning with rage. He called his uncle. That phone call changed everything. Keefe D has told this story himself in his own words across multiple interviews and in his autobiography. He said he did so for years while protected by an immunity deal he had negotiated with federal investigators in exchange for information about drug trafficking. He essentially confessed to his role in Tupac's murder in public on camera, with the full knowledge that he believed he could not be touched. He described how after Orlando called him, the crew regrouped, obtained a firearm, got into a white BMW, and began searching the Las Vegas Strip for Tupac's vehicle. They found it. And the rest is history that the entire world knows, but nobody had ever been formally charged for until recently.
But he put himself in that position. He did that.
And I never felt like they had something to do with it because it just didn't feel right. They was his friends at the time.
Nigga shot me 5 times. I came out of jail and sold $5 million.
What makes Keefe D's story so extraordinary and so disturbing is the level of detail he provided while simultaneously walking free. He spoke about the gun being passed around in the car. He spoke about the decision being made in real time. He spoke about spotting the black BMW carrying Tupac and Suge Knight. And then he described the shots being fired, Orlando Anderson allegedly pulling the trigger from the back seat while Keefe D sat in the front. He framed himself as a witness and a participant without ever clearly placing the gun in his own hand. It was a masterclass in confessing without technically confessing. For years it worked.
Metro Police have made no arrests, suspecting a rival gang targeted the rapper after a Mike Tyson fight. Someone in another car shot Shakur. The question, after all these years remaining, who was it? Sources telling the 8 News Now investigators Tuesday the warrant served at a home in Henderson Monday involved 60-year-old Dwayne Davis, also known as Keefe D.
Now here is where the story gets even darker. Keefe D did not just implicate himself and Orlando Anderson. He implicated Sean Combs, known as Puff Daddy, claiming that Diddy had offered money to have Tupac taken out. According to Keefe D, this offer was made during a period when tensions between Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records were at their peak. Keefe D claimed he was offered a significant sum to carry out the hit. Whether this is true, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated remains one of the most explosive and contested claims in hip-hop history. Diddy has denied any involvement, but the accusation alone reshuffled the entire narrative around Tupac's murder and introduced a level of conspiracy that went far beyond simple gang retaliation.
He's not accused of pulling the trigger. Instead, prosecutors allege he just orchestrated the whole thing. In some aspects, we may never know what truly happened, and here's why. Keefe D is the only one still alive that was allegedly in that car. Authorities have long believed it was Keefe D's nephew Orlando who pulled the trigger to get revenge from being jumped by Tupac, Suge Knight, and their crew after the Mike Tyson fight.
Orlando Anderson, the man Keefe D named as the shooter, never faced trial. He was killed in an unrelated gang shooting in 1998, 2 years after Tupac's death. Suge Knight, who was sitting in the passenger seat when Tupac was shot, has spent years in legal trouble for other crimes and has floated his own theories about who was responsible, pointing fingers in every direction except at himself. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department spent years stalled on the case, unable to get cooperation from witnesses and unable to penetrate the wall of silence that the streets maintain when it comes to gang-related murders. Tupac's case went cold, and Keefe D kept talking.
So the deal essentially was they had caught him with a bunch of PCP, and they allowed him to say what he knew about Tupac's murder in exchange for them dropping all those charges. And the way the deal was set up, whatever he said, as long as it wasn't proven to be false, it couldn't be used against him directly to indict him.
The immunity deal that protected Keefe D for so long was specifically tied to a federal drug investigation. It was not a blanket immunity for all crimes, and prosecutors eventually determined that the murder charges could be pursued separately. In September 2023, nearly 27 years after Tupac's death, Keefe D was arrested and charged with murder with use of a deadly weapon. The arrest happened outside his home in Henderson, Nevada. He was taken into custody without incident. And for the first time in almost 3 decades, someone was formally accused of pulling the trigger on one of the greatest artists who ever lived.
He essentially claims he fabricated what happened for money when he told his story. Keefe D's trial was actually set to begin this month, until a few weeks ago when his lawyer filed a motion to delay his case. They claim they have witnesses who can testify Keefe D wasn't in Vegas the night of the shooting, despite claiming for years he was.
The arrest sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community and beyond. People who had followed the case for years knew who Keefe D was. They had watched his interviews, they had heard him brag, they had read the excerpts from his book. And now, finally, the legal system was catching up to a man who had been hiding in plain sight for the better part of 3 decades. The evidence against him includes his own words, hours of interviews, a published autobiography, and the testimony of law enforcement officials who had documented his statements over the years. The prosecution's task is, in many ways, unique in the history of criminal law, building a murder case largely from the defendant's own public confessions.
Saying, "I'm not supposed to be in jail. A deal is a deal." Keefe D claims he confessed to his alleged role to keep people who were caught up in a drug case out of prison, and says he just told police what they wanted to hear, so they let him go. He said, "That's the only way you're walking free. It would have been selfish to let everyone go down because of me." At the time, Keefe D was facing life in prison on drug charges, so he spilled his guts in exchange for a deal. Ironically, now he's facing life in prison again.
What drove Keefe D to keep talking for so long? That question is as fascinating as the crime itself. Part of it was the immunity deal, which gave him a false sense of permanent protection. Part of it was ego. Keefe D clearly relished the notoriety. He positioned himself as a key figure in one of the most mythologized murders in American history, and he leveraged that positioning to sell books, appear in documentaries, and secure media attention that a retired drug dealer from Compton would never otherwise receive. He became famous for killing a famous person, and he enjoyed every minute of it. The tragedy of Tupac's death became Keefe D's personal brand.
He says Keefe D confessed to Tupac's murder to the LAPD in 2008, to the Las Vegas Metro PD in 2009, and publicly from 2018 to 2023 on BET, multiple YouTube interviews, and in a book about his life, and is only now using the media to slander me because he finally got arrested and he has no other defense.
But there is another layer to this that deserves serious examination. The world Keefe D came from did not view talking to the police as an option. Yet the code of the streets, the same code that kept witness after witness silent for decades, was supposedly the foundation of his entire identity. And yet Keefe D broke that code in the most spectacular way possible, not by going to law enforcement, but by going to cameras. He told his story to journalists, to documentary filmmakers, to anyone who would listen, because he believed he had constructed a legal shield that made him untouchable. He gambled that the immunity deal covered him forever, and that the details he revealed publicly could never be used against him in a murder trial. That gamble appears to have been catastrophically miscalculated.
We got strength in numbers. We already run the streets out here. So all these suckers, they battling off of East and West like this is a game. This ain't no game. If this was chess, we'd be yelling checkmate 3 years ago, because we've been beat these. It's not a game.
Tupac Shakur was 25 years old when he died. In his 5 years of mainstream prominence, he released material that addressed police brutality, systemic racism, poverty, and the contradictions of Black life in America with a clarity and emotional force that few artists in any genre have ever matched. He sold over 75 million records worldwide. He acted in films. He wrote poetry. He spoke about revolution and responsibility in the same breath as he spoke about street life and survival. His death created a void that hip-hop never fully filled, and it created a mystery that festered for almost 3 decades while the man who helped plan his killing gave interviews on YouTube.
Even when Vlad was interviewing him, because he was asking him stuff and he didn't know what the hell was in the book. You know, the writer was in the room, you know, he was asking him questions, and he's like, huh? Where you get that from? Huh? Vlad's like, it's in the book. Huh? He talking to the writer. Like, This is your story.
The investigation that finally led to Keefe D's arrest was years in the making and involved the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's cold case unit reviewing decades of accumulated evidence, including all of Keefe D's public statements. As detectives essentially built a case using the suspect's own documented confessions as primary source material, then worked backward to corroborate those statements with physical evidence, witness accounts, and the established timeline of events on the night of the shooting. It is a genuinely unprecedented prosecutorial approach, and its success or failure in court will determine whether Tupac's murder finally receives the legal closure it has been denied for a generation.
But the only thing he could correlate is said whoever killed Tupac had S hats on. And they got into with these dudes, and they saw it automatically in LA, that gold S hat, the Seattle Mariner hat, meant the homies. And I called the homies, like, man, and I had a cell phone at the time. Like, man, we ain't had nothing to do with that. That was, woo, you know what I mean, whatever happened.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, all right. And but that was the first time I heard when Tupac had got killed.
Did you know Tupac at all?
No, I never met him.
No relationship.
I knew his music though.
Yeah.
The trial, when it proceeds, will likely be one of the most watched criminal proceedings in years. The defense will almost certainly argue that Keefe D's public statements were exaggerated, that he was performing for an audience, that a man bragging about murder for profit and fame should not be taken at his literal word. The prosecution will argue that the consistency of his account across multiple interviews over multiple years in multiple formats constitutes an overwhelming body of self-incriminating evidence that cannot be dismissed as showmanship. Both arguments have merit, and the outcome is genuinely uncertain.
Now he is charged in one of the most notorious murder cases in America.
He's really a good person. He ain't no bad person.
A jury trial is scheduled for early 2026.
What is not uncertain is the weight of what this case represents. For Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, who died in 2016 never seeing justice for her son, this moment arrived too late. For the millions of fans who grew up with his music and his words, the arrest of Keefe D is both a vindication and a reminder of how long impunity can last when the victim is a black man from the streets and the killers operate behind a wall of gang silence and legal maneuvering. For the hip-hop community, it is a reckoning with a wound that never properly healed.
Following the death of the alleged gunman Orlando Anderson in 1998, many others involved in the situation have since passed away, so Keefe D is now one of the few living souls with a direct connection to it. As he's Anderson's uncle, we will see what this trial delay leads to in court and whether or not this Tupac mystery will come to a close.
Keefe D did not just take out Tupac. He spent the next 27 years profiting from it, talking about it, and daring the system to stop him. The most chilling part of this entire story is not the drive-by itself, it is confidence. The absolute certainty that he would never face consequences. The willingness to sit in front of cameras and describe with a smile how one of the greatest artists in the history of popular music was shot and killed in a car on a Las Vegas street. That confidence was not paranoia or madness. It was a rational calculation based on years of evidence that the system would not catch up to him. For 27 years, he was right. Then, finally, he was not. But as the trial looms and Keefe D faces his reckoning, that's one question remains. Will the full truth about Tupac's murder finally come to light, or will it remain buried beneath a mountain of lies, speculation, and silence? Hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated on this unfolding case.